Stealth camping. Stalker and night of terror. Sam had spent years perfecting the art of stealth camping, finding the most secluded spots, setting up a discreet camp, and blending into the wilderness. His YouTube channel, The Northwest Wind, documented these secretive overnights in hidden locations, from urban areas to remote woodlands. But in January 2024, one of his camping trips would take a horrifying turn, pushing him to the edge of fear and survival. It started like any other night. It ended with him running for his life. The perfect spot. That evening, Sam parked his camper van near a dog park on the outskirts of Cleveland. He wanted to be far enough from civilization to avoid any unwanted attention, but close enough to the main road in case he needed a quick exit. A few hundred yards into the woods, he found the perfect clearing. A small, flat space surrounded by thick trees, isolated and completely silent. He worked quickly, setting up his tent, securing his gear, and arranging his firewood. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, he started preparing dinner. A simple meal over his compact stove, the orange glow of the flames flickering against the darkening forest. Then something changed. A noise, faint at first. Just the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. Then another, closer. Sam's grip on his utensils tightened. He scanned the tree line, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. Nothing. He held his breath, waiting. Silence. Brushing off the unease, he continued cooking. Maybe it was just an animal. Maybe the isolation was playing tricks on his mind. Then, just as he sat down to eat, a pair of distant footsteps echoed through the trees, circling the camp. The footsteps didn't belong to an animal. They were slow, measured, human. Sam froze, listening intently. Whoever it was, they weren't approaching directly. They were circling. His pulse quickened. "Hello?" he called out, his voice firm but cautious. No response. The footsteps stopped. His flashlight flickered across the trees again. The cold air pressed in around him, thick with silence. Every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. Then suddenly, the footsteps resumed. This time they were faster, more erratic, closer. Sam bolted upright. His breath came in short, shallow bursts. Someone was moving around his tent, weaving through the trees like a predator stalking its prey. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound unshaken. Still, no answer. Then, the worst possible thing happened. The tent collapsed. The attack. Sam's stomach dropped as his tent caved in, the fabric sinking violently under the weight of something, or someone, pushing it down. He lunged forward, grabbing his knife. The air was electric with fear as he tore at the fabric, trying to escape before he was completely trapped. "Get away from me," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the trees. The tent remained motionless for a few agonizing seconds. Then, footsteps running. Whoever had been outside was retreating. Sam exploded out of the collapsed tent, knife clutched in his shaking hand. His flashlight darted wildly across the trees, searching for the attacker. They were gone. Only the sound of rustling leaves and his own ragged breathing filled the air. His mind raced. Was this a prank? Had someone been watching him from the moment he set up camp, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Then he realized his van was still hundreds of yards away. He needed to leave. Now, the chase. He grabbed his most important gear, stuffing it into his backpack with trembling hands. Every second spent standing there felt like an eternity. Then, footsteps. Again. This time they weren't retreating. They were coming back. Sam barely had time to process what was happening before he saw them. Two figures, standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of his flashlight beam, watching. His breath hitched. "What do you want?" he shouted, stepping backward. His fingers tightened around the knife. The figures didn't answer. They just stood there, staring. Then, as if on some unspoken signal, they started running toward him. Sam turned and ran. Harder than he had ever run in his life. His feet pounded against the frozen ground, breath coming in ragged gasps. The cold air burned his lungs, his flashlight bouncing wildly as he sprinted through the trees. Branches tore at his clothes. Shadows twisted in his peripheral vision. But he did not stop. He could hear them behind him. Their footsteps were fast. Too fast. They were chasing him. The escape. The woods felt endless. His body screamed for air, his legs burned with exhaustion. He wasn't thinking anymore. Just moving. Just surviving. Then, like a beacon in the darkness, his van appeared. Adrenaline surged through him. He fumbled for his keys, hands shaking so violently that he dropped them onto the dirt. The footsteps behind him grew louder. He grabbed the keys, yanked open the door, and threw himself inside. Slam, lock, engine, go. The van roared to life, headlights flooding the road as he peeled away. His heart pounded against his ribs as he sped down the narrow path, tires kicking up dirt and leaves. Only when he was miles away did he dare glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the endless, empty darkness of the woods. The aftermath. Sam didn't sleep that night. He didn't stop driving until he was back in the city, surrounded by people, by noise, by safety. The next morning, when the sun was up and the fear had dulled to a deep unease, he debated going back. He wanted to see if his tent was still there, if anything had been stolen. But then he remembered the figures, standing, watching, waiting. No, he would never go back. And to this day, he doesn't know who they were, what they wanted, or what would have happened if he hadn't run. But one thing still haunts him. They never spoke. Not once. The Trail of Shadows. A hiker's nightmare. In 2008, an 18-year-old named Matt Higgins set off on an adventure he had dreamed of for years. Inspired by the movie Into the Wild, he yearned for the raw, untamed wilderness. A place where he could test himself against nature and, perhaps, find something deeper within. His plan was ambitious. He would hike the entire California section of the Pacific Crest Trail, a grueling 1,700-mile trek stretching from the scorching deserts near the Mexican border to the misty, forested mountains near Oregon. It was a journey that would test his endurance, patience, and ultimately, his sanity. Matt was no stranger to the outdoors. He had spent his childhood hiking through the wilds of Oregon, camping in both marked and unmarked territories, navigating through dense woods where predators lurked unseen. But nothing, not even his years of experience, could have prepared him for what awaited him deep in the Lassen National Forest, a silent encounter. The first weeks of his hike were uneventful, even serene. He moved at his own pace, camping wherever he found a clearing, surviving on carefully rationed food. The occasional rattlesnake or unexpected dehydration spell was nothing new. But as he entered the remote, suffocating depths of Lassen National Forest, the air itself seemed to change. The trees pressed in closer, their gnarled limbs intertwining overhead, casting deep, shifting shadows even in broad daylight. The silence became oppressive. One afternoon, as he rounded a bend in the trail, he saw them. A man and a woman sat on a boulder just off the path. They were dressed entirely in white, loose, flowing clothes that seemed out of place in the rugged wilderness. Their faces were gaunt, their skin pale and smeared with dirt. The man had a thick, wild beard. The woman's hair was long and tangled. But what sent a chill creeping up Matt's spine was their eyes. They weren't merely watching him. They were staring at him, unblinking, their expressions unreadable. The longer he looked, the more unnatural they seemed. Their clothes were ragged, yet they sat in eerie stillness, their posture unnaturally stiff. Something about them felt wrong, as though they had been waiting for him. Matt hesitated, forcing himself to glance away. He muttered a quick hello as he passed them, but they didn't respond. Not a wave, not a nod, not even a flicker of recognition that he had spoken. Just those vacant, dead-eyed stares following him as he walked by. Unease prickled the back of his neck, but he shook it off. Maybe they were drifters, maybe they didn't speak English. He had no reason to worry. Or so he thought. The first violation. That night, Matt set up camp well off the trail, pushing deep into the trees for privacy. He followed his usual precautions, hanging his food high in a tree to deter bears. The air was thick and still, the kind of night where sound seemed to carry forever. But exhaustion overtook his unease, and soon he drifted into sleep. Sometime in the early hours, he stirred. A noise had woken him. A rustling just beyond his tent. At first, he thought it was just the wind shifting through the leaves. But then, something moved. A sound too deliberate. A faint crunch of leaves. Matt held his breath, every muscle in his body tensed. He could hear his heartbeat thudding against his ribs. Then, another step. And another. Slow, measured. Someone or something was approaching his tent. Frozen in place, he gripped the handle of his knife. His ears strained in the suffocating darkness, trying to track the sound. Then, just as suddenly as the steps had started, they stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that suffocates. The kind that makes you feel like you aren't alone. Minutes stretched on, but Matt didn't move. His pulse pounded in his ears. The air inside the tent felt thick and stifling. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his exhaustion overtook his fear, and somehow he drifted into a restless sleep. Dawn came like a fragile promise of safety. Matt unzipped his tent, blinking in the pale morning light, and stepped outside. That was when he noticed it. His food bag was gone. Confused, he stepped closer to the tree where he had carefully secured it the night before. At first, he assumed a bear had gotten to it. Perhaps it had clawed through the rope and dragged the bag away. But when he looked down, his stomach dropped. Boot prints, human boot prints, 2 distinct sets. They led from the edge of his campsite to the base of the tree where his food had hung. But that wasn't the worst part. The prints didn't just stop at the tree. They continued, circling his tent, pacing around him as he slept. A shiver crept up his spine. His blood turned ice cold. The people in white had followed him. They had been here, standing right outside his tent while he was asleep, watching him, waiting. His skin crawled as he retraced the steps. They had moved quietly, efficiently, never making enough noise to wake him. The realization made his breath come in shallow gasps. He had spent the night completely vulnerable while they prowled outside, just inches away. The whispering nightmares. Over the next few nights, Matt was plagued by eerie disturbances. The first night after the theft, he heard it again. Faint, deliberate footsteps just beyond the thin fabric of his tent. But this time, there was more. The whispering. At first, it was so soft he thought it was the wind, a trick of the night air weaving through the trees. But as he strained to listen, the murmurs grew clearer. Low voices, overlapping, speaking in hushed, frantic tones. Words he couldn't understand. Words that didn't feel meant for him, yet surrounded him. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He gripped his knife tighter. The footsteps circled. The whispers swirled. Then, snap. A stick, breaking. Close. And then something new. His tent lit up. A flashlight. A beam of harsh white light cutting through the darkness, illuminating the fabric from the outside. Matt's blood turned to ice. The light clicked off. Silence. Then rushing footsteps. A burst of movement, rapid, purposeful, charging toward his tent. Matt didn't think. He exploded from his sleeping bag, wrenching the tent zipper down in one frantic motion, his knife raised, a scream clawing at his throat. He lunged into the night, his eyes wild, his breath ragged. Nothing. Just darkness. Just trees. Just the lingering scent of something that wasn't quite right. His heart hammered as he backed away, his senses on high alert. He knew without a doubt that he was no longer alone. They were hunting him. This revision brings an even more nightmarish intensity to Matt's escalating encounters, emphasizing the fear and creeping paranoia. Let me know if you want further refinements.